Hey everyone, it's Kara CrossFit Brindle. Welcome back to the channel. I have Sybil with me. Sybil, you haven't been here for a while. So happy to have you back. Yay!
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so for folks who don't know you from our previous videos together, do you want to do a quick intro of who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm a licensed professional counselor, approved clinical supervisor. I run a small group practice in Arvada, Colorado. We specialize in kids, teens, and families, but even more specifically, we specialize in working with domestic violence and coercive control and narcissistic abuse. And I have a separate company, separate podcast, Rising Beyond Power and Control, and the Rising Beyond podcast that is very specific to that audience. Those who have survived the relationship have left and now we're still having the pleasure of being abused every
Mm,
day in post-separation abuse in the family court system. So that's
yeah,
sort of my wheelhouse.
I'm so glad you're actually bringing to light what is going on and like creating this community for people. I will absolutely put that below the video for folks who are like, I need that. So
Appreciate
I
it.
reached out, yeah, I reached out to you because we were talking offline about estrangement and how people navigate this. And I feel like you have some thoughts for our audience about the parents worry that if their child finds out that they're estranged from grandma, for example, let's just say grandma, that the parent will be blamed at some point when this child gets old enough to recognize that or be like, Mom, this is your fault. I don't have grandma in my life. I know that's come up in my therapeutic work with clients. I'm sure it's come up in your work.
Mhm.
So what should we start with your thoughts here on this concern that parents have?
Yeah, I think that one, if you have experienced any type of coercive controlling behaviors from your parent, then you are likely going to start doubting your decision
Mm,
about what you're telling your kids. And you're going to doubt, like, is this right? Is this harming my kids? But I know my kids aren't safe around this person. Maybe I should just, let them see their grandchild or all of those things. So I think first, like, to really be aware of, like, there's a reason I don't feel like having my kids around this person is safe. And so
yeah.
giving yourself that grace and like acknowledgement that what you've experienced is real.
Hmm. I'm hearing
And
like self trust too, of like, don't doubt
yes,
yourself. You made this choice, like, even if it's a couple months or years later, it sounds like a valid choice. Like, none of us can say it's not. But like that self
yeah.
trust of like, I did this for a reason. I really like that.
Yeah. And that's often like what's taken, right? When you have
Mm,
been in these relationships, whether it's a parent and a spouse, any is that you lose your sense of trust in yourself because of all the gaslighting and minimization and you're crazy and all the things. And
mm.
so if you've worked hard to get some of that back, trust this decision too.
Yeah, yeah. So feeling like I hope all of our listeners and viewers are like feeling seen if this is part of their experience. And I imagine there's something to be said when child comes to them asking, why aren't we talking to grandma? I know that
Yes.
I've obviously created some videos on this myself, but what are your thoughts on that? What do
Yeah.
they say?
Yeah. I think, and some of it is like case by case and age dependent, right? You're going to
Yes,
talk to a 6-year-old really different than you're going to talk to a 13-year-old. A
right.
13-year-old, you might get to share some of your experiences with grandparent. With a 6-year-old, you might not share the same experiences. And I think the underlying feeling is, it's my job as your parent to keep you safe. And that means your body safe and your feelings and heart safe.
Hmm.
And my experience with this person is that they might harm your heart or they might harm, again, this is like a 6-year-old. I'm not telling my 13-year-old son, "No, they might harm your heart." He'd be like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
mom, you're done." But if I would, right. And then if you're talking with an older child, they are going to have more questions.
Hmm.
And so then it's like, when I was your age, and then you can share, right? Like I worked so hard and the only thing I cared about was my parent giving me a hug and a high five and telling them I am amazing and they love me no matter what. And yet if I got a bad grade or if I didn't win the game, I didn't get any love. I was, shamed for that or whatever, right? Whatever is in your situation. So that teen age, you can share the thing
Hmm.
and also let them know, like, right now it's my job to keep you safe, to teach you something I talk a lot about is like discernment. I wouldn't use that word with the kids, but like being able to listen to your body and decide, is this person safe? Is this situation safe? How safe and how much do I get to share with this person?
Right.
Right. So like middle school girls, they're going to share their whole life with someone they met yesterday.
Mm.
Every deepest, darkest feeling and sadness, and because this new person's their best friend, yes, from yesterday. And then guess what? Rumors are told about this poor girl in
Mm.
school, right? They have no discernment, zero discernment. And so it's our job to really teach that discernment of okay, it feels safe to tell this person because it feels safe to be with this person because. And so
Right.
letting you know, right? Like, so right now that's my job to help you do that. When you're 16, 17, 18, then I hope I have given that to you and you get to make your own
Mm.
decisions.
Absolutely. Well, and I feel like that naturally then leads to like you get to decide if you want to have this person in your life when you're 16, 17, 18, most likely 18, because you're out of the
Mm-hmm.
person's household or an adult by
Yeah.
law. So I know that's a fear of the parents of like, I don't want to be accused of holding them from their grandparent or that I'm the bad guy. How would you navigate that with parents and children?
Yeah. And so in all of my work, that other person's going to lie and be horrible and tell false narratives about the parent in this
Right.
situation. And so some of that is not defending yourself over and over, because what we know is like when someone like constantly defends, you're like, oh, they're guilty.
Mm.
Right. But it's okay to say, that's not my experience. That's not how I see it. So if they come to you with, well, grandma said X, Y, and Z, you can say, that's not my experience.
Mm.
Um, I hope your experience with me is this way. So it's like really showing the contrast and being really consistent of like, this is who I am. Your kids know who you are. So if they're like, oh, your mom will say this, but she doesn't ever follow through. And if you're like
Mhm.
saying stuff and following through, you have evidence to back that up. It's like, oh, that's not my perception of this. And I'm wondering if you would like examples. They might want
Mhm.
examples. They may not want examples. But then you can share, like, when I say I'm going to get you this, I get you this. When I say this is the consequence, this is the consequence. And
Right.
so showing that consistency so that the false narratives that are likely going to be said about you, you don't have to verbally, no, that's not true, and get all up in your fight or flight about that, which you will. Like
Mhm.
you're going to feel the fight or flight or freeze when that's coming up. And this is a really calm, clear, easy way to be like, is that your experience of me that I don't follow through? And
Yeah.
then
So it's
gives
almost
them
like
the
a
thought.
child version of like, what's the evidence this is true versus false, like CPT right there.
Yes. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like that. So I heard consistency in my head too, and then you said it, and I'm like, yep, that's tracking, and that they can ask questions, but also like, what's the evidence this is true? What's the evidence it's false? What thoughts do you have if grandparent in this scenario that we keep sharing? If grandparent reaches out through social media or writes child a letter while they're still a minor under the care of their parent who's saying, we're estranged, we're not talking to them.
Yeah. I think that social media is harder, right? Because you're not like a 13-year-old who's sort of on social media. Do I check his stuff? Yes. Do I check it every minute of the day? No, I do not. Right. And so you might miss something. And then it's going to be like, ooh, lots of questions are going to happen in this situation. And then I think it really is like a pretty boundary, like this is why I've
Mm-hmm.
chosen to keep you from them. Again, like I know, like when I was growing up, I was not physically safe, I was not emotionally safe, I was whatever it might be, and I don't want that for you. It's so hard. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like that's why we're going to block her or him, and I need you to like tell me if they reach out to you on social media. Depending on the situation, as the mama bear, like I'm thinking like what would I do? I would probably want to reach out, and that might not be the right option. I would be
Mm-hmm.
like, how dare you,
Yeah,
message
stay
my
away from my kid. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
but that may be what they're going for. Contact with
Mm.
you, get you all riled up, and to like open that line of communication again.
Yeah. Yeah, like that
And
manipulation. Mm-hmm.
and if that's going to derail you, your healing, your parenting, your stuff, then no. Then it's like, well, block. Sorry. And if my kids get something in the mail, because snail mail, right? Like even a snail mail hardly anymore, but when they do, I am with them when they open that,
Mm-hmm.
because then I could be like, oh, grandma, like, and then
Yeah,
I'm
like
really
grandma
aware
sent you a birthday card. You're like, I don't
what it
talk to
is.
grandma. Now I have
Yeah, who's
questions about
that?
grandma.
Who's this?
Yeah,
Um,
no, this is super helpful because I feel like what we're doing is we're just normalizing all the different possibilities of outreach and the intention that could be behind those outreaches. And the big thing I'm hearing from you and my other professionals I've interviewed on this topic is like parent regulation. Like, how do I stay out of fight or flight? How do I keep myself composed?
yeah.
Because this is hard. Like, estrangement is emotional, and there's a lot of self doubt, and we're trying to build that self trust we all want and need. But
Mm,
like, if these things happen, maybe just this video is going to help someone feel more prepared. That's what I'm hoping
yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And the number one thing is to slow down.
Mm.
Slow down. So if you see that message or you check your kid's phone, because I check my kid's phone and there's a text between, person that you're estranged from and your child, you're going to be a crazy person if you don't slow down.
Mm.
So
Mm-hmm. We'll just
slow
normalize that
down,
now. Yeah.
right? Slow down, take your deep breaths, figure out like what's your next best step, because yelling at your kid like a crazy person will basically probably prove the narrative of the person you're estranged from.
Ooh, mic drop right there. Mm-hmm.
Right. So if you're like, and oh my God, I can't believe this. And why didn't you tell me? And blah, blah, blah. Yeah, grandma says you're controlling.
Mm.
You're like, I did
Ouch.
just present as controlling, right? So the
And you don't even
slowing
really hear
down,
that until you're slowed down and like regulated again.
oh,
You're just like, wow.
yes. So like the slowing down, you don't need to address it right now before dinner. It's not going to harm them before dinner. It's already, whatever harms happen has harmed them. So before dinner, after dinner tomorrow, that's fine. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so slow it down, do what you need to do to regulate and to think through, like, if I reached out, what would that look like? If we just block, what would that look like? Do I need just to supervise more? Do I need, like, what needs to happen? Because then you're going to not doubt. You're going to feel
Yeah,
much better with your decision.
I like that. Like, play it through all of the possibilities, and maybe that actually makes them feel more grounded because they're like, well, I could
Mhm.
reach out and this could happen, or I could block them and this could happen. It
Yeah,
seems
and
very
you
like
know them
logical.
better than anybody. You know them better than anybody, probably. And so you
Mm-hmm.
can predict. You will be close to what their reaction would be either way,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because you know how they work.
And I imagine, based on your expertise working with youth and families, that if that child gets to an age where they can outreach their estranged grandparent, that's something they could get some support around in therapy. Is
Mhm.
that right?
Yeah, and if you can't hold your stuff together because it just causes too much dysregulation, a therapist would be a great person. You can share, like, I have these concerns. Could you be like the conduit, like the person that processes this with child? Because I literally can't do it.
Yeah,
Like,
but
I
they can't
will turn
regulate.
into a
Mm-hmm.
parent that I don't want to be, and I want them to have a safe place to make their decision.
Mm-hmm. And I have such respect for parents who've said that to me, where they've been like, I need a, because I don't work with children anymore. You know that, but for
Mhm.
viewers, they may or may not know that. But like, that's where I love referring to colleagues that I know are not going to cause more harm when it comes to this like polarization of estrange, no contact, or reconcile, because that's a whole thing.
Mhm.
But if they can
Mhm.
actually just be a safe container for this kid to be like, here are my questions, here are my thoughts. I don't know what to do. I want to talk to my grandma. I feel like I'm missing out. But a parent can't hold that, can't regulate that because it's just so painful, the trauma they've been
Yeah.
through with their parent. I think therapy is a great place too. I mean, we're both biased, but like, I agree.
Yeah, very biased. Yeah,
No,
and
this is
the,
awesome.
the question that comes up so often, with my kids and the kids that I work with, most of them are in a high conflict divorce, which means abuse. So
Mm-hmm.
put that out there. But the question that they bring to me all the time is, I don't know who to believe.
No. Mm-hmm.
And they are stuck. And so your kiddo, whether it's a spouse, a grandparent, a whomever, they may not know who to believe.
Mhm.
And for you to hear that and be like, I've raised you and I put a roof over your head and I'm with you at every little league game or whatever it might be, that's really hard. But they can ask me
Mhm.
with no, right? Like I don't get emotional about that.
Nope, no agenda.
Let's have the
Mm-mm.
conversation. Let's do it. Let's figure it out.
Yeah,
But that's a space that kids are in a lot.
absolutely. And I don't know if this is worth putting on a video or not, but I was like, if they were an older teen, I'd be like, what if you don't have to decide who to side with? Like, what if you
Mm-hmm.
live in the gray? And then might be like, right, because therapists also don't like
Yes.
to live in the gray. But like, I don't know, that would be something to kind of unpack, feel apart, and say, what if you
Yeah.
didn't have to side with one person? What if you just got to see this play out
Right.
for a year until you're 18? Whatever.
Yeah. And maybe there's a piece, of parent that isn't like you and you can do, like brush things off that feel different. Like you don't need this person's approval.
Mm-hmm.
Like you need your parents, or you don't need it, but like you want your parents' approval. You don't even know this person. And so you're going to feel potentially differently, as the child might feel differently about it. And so just them not having to have like loyalty feels and
Right.
issues and not wanting to hurt feelings if they're thinking about, okay, I know my mom doesn't want me to have contact. I know that this person was super abusive to mom. I want to I want to see.
For myself. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean,
And
we've
so,
all been there, right? Where we're like,
yeah,
yeah, parents, you told me like, don't do this thing, don't do drugs, da, 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 but like, we want to see for ourselves.
you got to like, do they really know they were born when they walked up, 5 miles to school or
Each
whatever? Yeah.
way in a foot of
Yeah.
snow. Yep.
Hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think
Garrett.
it's important to put in here that sometimes grandparents do show up completely different with their grandchildren. And I don't think that
Yeah.
means that they've like put on a face for one or the other. Sometimes they've just changed over time, or the pressure of parenting is not there because they're a grandparent role. So that's something else I've been diving into. Does that resonate with
Yeah.
what you've seen too?
Yeah, and I think the tricky piece is usually the relationship between like grandparent and their child. Those dynamics don't change very often that I've seen. But there could be something different because the grandchild is often less an extension of the grandparent than the
That's
child
right.
is an extension of the parent, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
It definitely
So,
does.
it's like, yes, they get to go to, they're like, I don't know, old people are at McDonald's all morning. I don't know what that's about, but they get coffee at McDonald's. So you're going to go to your friends at McDonald's in the morning with your coffee and be like, oh, my grandbaby did X, Y, and Z. And everyone's like, oh, that's wonderful. But it feels different than when it's your own kid if you are leaning more towards the cluster B
Mm,
personality type. Um, then it is a little bit more separated, I think, than
yeah,
when it's your.
that totally tracks. Uh-huh. And for any, I mean, for our therapist watchers of this video, they're like, I hear you. I read between the lines. I got
I
it.
see.
Fair enough, Sybil. So, any last thoughts, any final thoughts for our audience when we think about the topic of children potentially blaming or questioning parents' decision with estrangement?
Yeah, I think, and I hope this doesn't put pressure. Like I'm a mama, and I don't need any more mom shame, guilt on my
Mm-hmm.
shoulders. I don't need any more of that. And if your relationship is unconditional, and you allow them to develop their own sense of self, you have a good connection with your child, your relationship will not be deeply harmed by this other person.
Mm-hmm. I love
If
that.
it so it's like the focus may, if you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know if that's me, then the focus isn't on like, what do I do when grandma calls? It's what can I do to build connection with my kid right now?
Mm-hmm.
Because that,
Right.
I mean, in all of the things, that's what's going to give our child resiliency. That's what's going to allow them to learn the discernment. That's what's going to allow them to have great attachment, like a strong sense of self. Value based, value system is allowing them some agency and autonomy and that you see them. So that, right? So that if you are working on that as they're growing up, you have so much less to worry about from that other person.
Yeah. And just like I can just feel the body sensation of like, almost like we can take a breath. Like, oh, what Sybil just said is like, all right, parents, like you don't have to white knuckle through this and worry about the worst possible scenario. Like if you've created this healthy attachment with your child and you built trust in them and you, You're going to be okay.
Yep. Yep.
Beautiful. I love that. So, where can people find you? I am going to put this below the video, of course, but just for people who are auditory learners, where can they find you?
Yes. Yeah. So if you are in Colorado, my therapy practice is Arvada Therapy Solutions. So it's just www.arvadatherapysolutions.com. And if you or someone you work with is experiencing that coercive control, domestic violence, I use the term narcissistic abuse. That's a whole nother conversation, Karen and I can have. But that is called Rising Beyond Power and Control. And so you can find all the information, including the podcast, at www.risingbeyondpc.com.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sybil, for your expertise and these like beautiful little nuggets of how to navigate something that feels so painful and dysregulating for families. I really appreciate you. Thanks for coming
Yeah,
today.
thanks for having me.
All right, viewers, stay tuned for more videos. We'll see you next time.